All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll be picking up from where we left in the previous lecture with respect to the concept of how we have to approach questions on art and culture, history basically, for prelims, specifically for prelims. Okay. Now, we were discussing the topic of literature. I gave you an orientation on how to approach literature, and we will be discussing whenever you are reading any textbook or any notes with respect to this topic, how should you approach? Now, when you see text like this in a linear format, our usual instinct is to start memorizing. Right. Before you start memorizing, let me explain the shift in how questions are designed from 2020 to 2025. Okay. Let's understand how questions are designed. To begin with, your usual approach for exam from 2013, ever since the format of the paper changed, till almost 18, 19, I would say 17, and from 18 it changed, and after 2020, that is another phase. So whatever you saw between 2013 and 2019 is an old method. Whatever you are seeing 2020 and afterwards is a new style of asking questions. Why am I talking about this before art and culture? It's important because you need to know how you can optimize your mental energy. Without understanding this, if you go for rote learning, by hearting every piece of information, it will not help you clear the exam. So first, let me explain the context of how people used to clear the prelims in this phase, especially from history standpoint, history, art and culture standpoint, and how is the situation after 2020. Okay. In the 2013 to 2019 phase, usually what is the understanding here? Let's say you pick up any 4 or 5 subjects out of the 7 subjects that 7 syllabus pointers, I mean. Pick up any 4, you do the standard textbooks end to end, previous year questions, you can ignore some parts and can still get away. Okay, so that is the phase from 2013 to 15, the first 2 years. Pick up any 3-4 subjects, you will clear. So if you do Lakshmikant polity, some economic survey, geography NCRTs, you will clear the exam, because 2013 and 14 also had CSAT. So the advices that you hear on YouTube have a residue from each era. So you need to have an informed decision ability to know what advice to pick and what advice to reject. That is the reason why I am explaining this. This is the first era. In 2016, it was direct current affairs, like one-liners. So the era of magazines and current affair magazines started here. Okay? People started mugging up data. So this was an era where I know personally a person who was preparing for bank exams cleared UPSC prelims without understanding anything about mains. Eventually that person did not sit for the mains exam, that's a different thing. Just telling you, a person who casually by-hearted everything from the magazines, he was preparing for bank exams, that person cleared. Great aptitude, MCQ aptitude he had, so he cleared the exam. The years following, the complexity in the so-called current affairs increased. So this was the era where most people started treating current affairs like a separate subject. And this was the era where Geo free internet came into the picture. So YouTube plus Geo plus exam pattern created confusion among aspirants, where they started treating current affairs like a separate subject. what UPSC expects from you is not current affairs but current awareness. It is the overall understanding of the problems of that particular society at that particular point of time. Are you updated enough to solve the problems? That is what UPSC is expecting from you. But UPSC has to set some way of some context, right? It can't directly give abstract questions. So this current information is the way of UPSC to tell to the aspirant community that this is the direction I'm moving in. Then the lines between static and dynamic, the current affairs part, started to blur. But the influence of this year was so strong that people started by-hearting every piece of information, ignoring the static parts like this. And this trend continued till 2020. In 2020, the COVID year, that year, you've seen some very unusual way of asking questions. Why was it unusual? Because that's the first time people who are constantly clearing the prelims exam, they were taken aback. Why? Because the patterns of how UPSC started asking questions started to change that year. I'll give you a small context. This is a very famous YouTube trick. If there is a question on a term within something like this, apostrophes, if you see some question term like this, and there are options A, B, C, D, mark A. I was not aware of this. But looking at apostrophes and marking A was something that I could not understand. Okay, tried to understand what could be the reason. I was trying to find a logic to that. It just so happened that there are many questions like this. Then the only answer that I could come up with is, how will the examiner think? Let's say if I want to ask a very random topic like this, it is easy for me to place the answer here. The rest of the distracting questions, distracting options, whatever is there, I'll dump it down. Like anyway, I don't care. But can you use that probabilistic angle to clear the exam? No. Who should apply this kind of techniques? Let's say you are on the border. Like usually you see that people who are already in the services, who already cleared multiple times prelims, they clear the exam again and again. And when you ask those advisors, they'll probably tell you that this kind of patterns work for them. Yes, it did work for me, but I was not aware. When I cleared the exam, I did not look at this pattern. I have to give it to that person who discovered it. But this will not matter in your selection. Tricks like this will not matter in your selection. The questions, the 35 to 45 questions, which are from static. Let's say, for example, if you are getting confused between Article 19 and 21, tricks like this will not save you. Okay? So, people used to, those who could not clear the prelims exam consistently were the ones who made this silly mistakes. I'll put that, in quotations here, silly. This is the era where most people ignored even basic art and culture logic. This is all the more true for history. They used to get modern India right. But culture, even basic questions, common sense based questions also, they used to get it wrong. Then they moved towards current affairs and they relied on things like this. Somehow, the same YouTube ecosystem discovered that this is all nonsense and started warning and pushed the entire ecosystem back to static. Now UPSC is also fighting a battle. it can't make more and more difficult questions in current affairs. So it started moving towards. So the post-COVID phenomenon is that static became tougher. The only predictable arena which was supposed to save us became tougher because the options that you see, they are becoming more and more random. This randomness is what started impacting the psyche of the student. The minute they are looking at those static questions, because they relied on static, this is where it feels like you're almost cheated on the day of the exam. Because nobody told you that, static can also get difficult. I mucked up 1,000 pages. How can you ask from the 1,001st page? You feel cheated, right? But you are not owed anything. The problem is you are not preparing logically. The questions might seem difficult in the framing, but they're actually not. If you understand the underlying concept, you can still solve them. Same is the case with the so-called current affair questions, where you usually depend on patterns like this. 2023 came as an absolute shocker for entire community, and they started ranting about why UPSC is becoming all factual, because YouTube ecosystem didn't give them any choice. In 2016, when a student who could not study for the entire year, sat with that compilation for 2 weeks and cleared the exam. A person who sat for an entire year, using his time on static, could not clear, felt equally cheated. So the bottom line I'm trying to tell you is, people always ask, what changes? Let us go back to the question, what does not change? Your ability to understand the concepts with clarity is what does not change. This exam is meant to check people who have the ability to judge logically. Logic will never change. It changes format from one format to another format. For example, we all have this elimination tricks, right? Let's say, for example, this A, whatever this logic is, if it is existing any, I don't see the logic here. It is just a pattern. If you want to take the risk, you're free to take that risk. This video was widely circulated, and in the subsequent year, UPSC did this. They gave a question. In the world of finance, the term, again, it's almost as if UPSC is trolling us. Beta is dash. A, B, C, D. Do you know what is the answer this time? Most of the people marked A, answer is D. So, UPSC and surviving UPSC is not only about knowing what to pick, it is about knowing what to avoid. Avoid the traps laid by UPSC. So you cannot enter into this zone. UPSC is the master there. Respect that. What is your strength? Static concept. Both current affairs as well as static concept. So when it comes to approaching history, one might be wondering, what is the concept here? There is no concept, right? If you know it, you know it. If you don't know it, what can I do about it? This shift in the thinking is what is needed to survive this 2026 exam. And what I am intending to do here is trying to create that shift in your thinking. It might be a random text. All I can say is I can sit and read out the text. How is it going to help you? Not really. What will really create that shift is understanding why the text is organized like this. UPSC is not going to ask what are the ancient languages, what are the various categories. Simple logic is, why is it categorized like this? What is Shruti and what is Smriti? Why is it categorized like that? You need to know the objective logic of the categorization. That is the beginning step. Now let me clarify this point. We have discussed the languages used. We are going back to the literature part again. We are discussing the languages: Sanskrit, Tamil, Pali, Prakrit, Kannada, etc. etc. If you have multiple languages, what do those respective languages signify? This is the question I'm asking. It's a very obvious point. But if you understand this logic, there are multiple languages, right? Why do we have multiple languages? Let's say in the present ecosystem, we all have our respective mother tongue. But why is it that I'm speaking in English? It has a certain function. The reason why I'm speaking in English is because our mother tongues can be different. You might or might not understand the language that I speak. So, to create that common ground, English is serving that purpose. Doesn't mean English is superior or other languages are inferior. Are you aware of this trend, not just in present times, but also in the olden times? This is the logic that you need to know. Today we are talking about equal respect. That equal respect, did it exist in the olden times? Yes or no? This will give you clarity on various things. Now, in the Vedic times, you have seen that language is divided into, the texts are divided into, the entire body of literature is divided into Shruti and Smriti. Why? Why is it like this? What does the word Shruti indicate and what does the word Smriti indicate? But why is it that the Vedic literature, some of it is only for memory, some of it is only for oral tradition? Yes? Learn the pronunciation then. That cannot be an excuse. Then why not make it entirely documented? Now, with this question, have a look at what is Smriti, what is Shruti. Smriti means something that is documented, memorized and passed on to the next generation. It is documented. From memory, you are documenting and passing it on to the next generation. What are that? Vedangas, epics, Puranas, Bhagavad Gita. Puranas, for example, are they written or they are just given to us? Are they written? Can you tell me what is the time period of this text? Gupta age, right? Why in Gupta age? My question is, why only in Gupta age? Why patronage only to this? Why only at this point? Why not before? Why not after? Yes? Because of economic prosperity. If you have economic prosperity, why not support Buddhists? You have a choice. Why did they support this? Why not Buddhism? Once you start asking questions like this, it becomes very interesting. But a large body of literature of, let's say, Puranas came into existence in this period. Not before that, not after that. Why Gupta period is that sweet spot? Bhakti in 300 AD? 300 to 500, 600 AD? Not much. What does temple architecture have anything to do with Purana writing? You tell me. I'm asking you the questions. Correct. Legitimacy. Now, let's go back. What is the source of Vedic civilization's power? What gained legitimacy? Legitimacy means acceptance from the people. During the Vedic period, what gave legitimacy to that era? It's the ability of creating a social order based on the knowledge of Vedas, which is accommodative in nature. And if you take a look at the way Vedas were organized, they were believed to be given by, they existed even before the universe came into existence. Nobody knows the origin. It is believed that they are existing forever. There is no concept of God here. Please understand. Anthropomorphic God, as you and I understand today. Anthropomorphic means in human form. It's a very new addition. New as in not during the early Vedic period. So, this knowledge is supposed to be placed in the people who have the ability to handle that secret knowledge. Not secret knowledge, like sacred knowledge, I would say. Because it is something that is supposed to be handled with responsibility. So, you have this Guru Sishya Parampara where the knowledge is practiced by the Gurus and is passed on to the next generation. It is not documented because people at that point of time felt you have to live a certain kind of a lifestyle. Give up everything. You should not have any desire for materialistic things because your dharma is to uphold this knowledge and it is meant for safeguarding the social order. That is why it is only on hearing. Like you have this concept of mantropadesha from a guru to the disciple. Why? Because it is even recited as a secret, because it is a responsibility passed on to the next generation, because it is their dharma. But when it comes to the smriti part, it is meant for acting as a way of life, for solving social problems that commoners have endured in their life. If you take a look at the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, all those which are based on the 4 Vedas, handle different components of our life and tell us and give us a way of living our life. It was meant to create that social order. And that is why they were documented and passed on to the next generations. Puranas are nothing but the symbolic stories. For example, there was a very interesting conversation I've had when I was on a tour at one of the temples, maybe in Maharashtra somewhere. I don't remember the exact location. There was a foreigner who was visiting and reading about, just noticing the architecture, the texts, etc., and he was taking down notes. I went up to him out of curiosity and asked what he was doing. Apparently, he was an Indologist who was trying to understand. So, he was actually correcting a tourist guide who was telling how, that Kali Mata, for example, was not supposed to be taken literally, because the tourist guide was directly telling story to another fellow Indians only that this is the place where Kali Mata came and killed, like as if it was a literal story. So this person came up to them and said, like, don't take it in a literal way. This is from a certain Purana, which I don't remember, like, at that point of time. And it is actually a representation of what values it stands for. I was preparing for that exam at that point of time, and that's when it struck me. Art and culture is entirely about representation of a value. If you do it through a sculpture, it is a value. If you do it through a language, it is a value. If you do it through some sort of a, exaggerated symbolism, that is a value. Ultimately, art and culture is about value. That's the takeaway from that conversation. So, similarly, coming back to the context here, Smriti and Shruti, we were talking about it. They have a certain classification, they have a certain purpose. Each of this literary styles, Smriti, Vedangas, epics, Puranas, Bhagavad Gita, they are meant for different aspects of our life. And therefore, they are categorized under the Smriti. Okay? That's what you should know. Now, I would say that language is a cultural element which indicates the flow of social change. Let me explain why. Like I was talking about this from Vedic period till, let's say, Gupta. Sanskrit more or less was existing. Okay. You mentioned about the concept of legitimacy. When I was talking about this Gupta period, it came at a point where Buddhist thought was declining. Why was this Buddhist thought declining? Because it followed the same pattern of social decay of the previous Brahmanical traditions, where the knowledge was just confined to a select few, which was never the original intent in this time period. So this became very ritualistic. And if you see the 4 Varnas, Chaturvarna system, access was limited to the top classes, the bottom classes never got it. So what was supposed to be a merit-based system became a rigid system. And that was the problem that Buddhism was trying to solve. You have the Hinayana period, and after the 1st century you have had the Mahayana period, where the peak of Buddhism was seen, and then again it decayed because it became the same system that it tried to reject. Okay? You have to understand that Buddha never claimed himself to be a god. The Mahayana period witnessed literal worship of Lord Buddha in anthropomorphic form, and it literally replicated what this system was meant to reject. There was, a decay, social decay of monks, like the Buddhist order, nuns and monks. They were not literally adhering to the code of conduct established by Buddha. And it is at that juncture where there was a vexation with this kind of lifestyle, and the pushback of the Brahmanical traditions, and a reform was called for. So this time saw a reinterpretation of the texts therein. But you have to understand one more thing. It was still confined to the elite classes. So the patronage that you see in the Gupta period was because it gave that specific time period respect to the kings, because they used Sanskrit, because they patronized this way of life. It gained them a lot of respect and acceptance in that society, because it kind of restored the balance which was under a social decay at that point. So you will see parallel existence of Buddhism and Brahmanical traditions, but it's like Buddhism is going towards a downward side, and this is the period where Brahmanical tradition was again in the rise. In the south, you already have Satavahanas who were equally promoting both. Okay. So this is a trend that you need to observe. Now, at this point of time, when you're talking about elite lifestyle of Guptas, what will be the language? Sanskrit. First world problems, as we call it. Because let's say, for example, if you look at the content of cinema that is produced, there are various categories. Let's say, for example, for the sake of this argument, I'm trying to use stereotypes. Please don't take it personally if you're a fan. Okay. Let's say, for example, you take Karan Johar movies, the kind of movies he made. They were mostly meant for NRIs, crowds, etc. because the kind of lifestyle that they resonate with at that point of time. This is a sociological analysis carried out by many people, that why movies like Pushpa resonated with a pan-India crowd. Because it was many decades they made a movie that appealed to the masses. That's why that occasional Salman Khan movie which appealed to the masses was a big hit in 2010s. Okay. After that, there was no such movie. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, I'm trying to tell you the society that this literary pieces were created. They were patronized by kings. So they were mostly dramas which were written in Sanskrit, which reflected the problems of majorly about the kingdoms and their people, but it did not give as much weightage to the common people. Now, with that context, see the kind of text that you will find at this point of time. What is the kind of work that you will see in Gupta period? For example, Kalidas, Meghadutam, Abhignana Shakuntalam. Are these works which are reflecting common people life? No, right? In fact, if you take a look at the language choice of people in that place, like women, did they speak Sanskrit? What was the language spoken there? Prakrit. So you can see that differentiation, gender parity is not there, class equality is not there. This is from a sociological standpoint. It is easier for you to remember it like this. That's the reason I'm giving this sociological categorization. Observe the movement of society as seen from the lens of the literary choices. Clear? Take a look at the nature of work. They were mostly dramas, comedies, or plays which reflected the elite. Okay. The reason why Gupta period saw a peak, like you all rightly recognized, is because of economic prowess. And why only this? Because the alternative shamanic traditions, they were losing popularity. Legitimacy is a very, very important concept that defines the trajectory of that time period. Why is a certain king promoting a certain religion? Legitimacy. What gives them legitimacy? They will promote it. Was Ashoka a born Buddhist? Maybe, may not be. Nothing in our NCERT level text suggests that. The Kalinga battle is the metamorphosis of the king, because it gave him legitimacy. What is the word used in our textbooks? What is Berigosha? Dhammagosha. What is the change in the policy here? From violence to peace as a tool to gain legitimacy. That tool of Berigosha to Dhammagosha. That Dhammagosha is nothing but a religious idea. So it's basically like the society is vexed with lack of access to the privilege of moksha, which is the ultimate idea of every religion at that time. You're understanding all this. These analysis is what helps you in clearing this exam. Observe the nuances there, which will help you identify the right option, because there is a limit to how much you can by heart. You have to by heart the previous year questions, NCERT level textbooks, and after that it is logic, reading behind the reading in between the lines, as they call it. This is what you mean by reading between the lines, because every text would have this kind of short notes. How will you make sense of it if you don't understand it? So this is one way. Take a look at this. What is the difference between why you have Apabhramsa and Pali, two different literary styles? Yes? See, Sanskrit is a pan-Indian elite language. But when it comes to the second preference, why do you have in two different time periods two different choices? What does it tell you? See, I understand the stratification part when you're talking from the context of Sanskrit and Prakrit. My question is Sanskrit and Prakrit, Sanskrit and Pali, Sanskrit and Apabhramsa. The choice. That is a common theme. But why only Apabhramsa in this part of the country? This is where the 5 language classes come into the picture. The influence of local race, what appeals to the masses in that specific region, decided the trajectory of these respective languages. Some faded away, some stayed. So during the Buddhist period, you will see in that Magadhan kingdom, the Mahajanapada period, Pali is one of the widely spoken vernacular language, the colloquial language. So most of the texts written in the early phases of Buddhism are actually from Pali. Tripitakas, what language were they written? Sanskrit. Why not in Sanskrit? The very purpose with which Buddhism came into existence is to make the knowledge and access of the fruits of religious knowledge accessible to the common people. Why write it in Sanskrit if they want common people to get access to this? It doesn't make any sense, right? This is how you have to approach it. Now, when it comes to Sangam period, here the beauty about Dravidian languages is the dramatization aspect, the symbolism aspect in just about every walk of life. For the first time in Indian literature, you will see a tradition where we are trying to link language with a certain kind of an emotion. You're trying to represent a geography with certain kind of an emotion. For example, if you are a person who is waiting, Tamil literature, Sangam literature, you are waiting for your loved ones to come back. A certain geography is used as a metaphor to signify that this person is waiting. If you are overlooking the hills into the valley, that is a symbolism that you are waiting for someone, which was depicted in our literature, Sangam literature. So this is the distinct aspect where ecology, geography, emotion are unified into a single system. That is the takeaway for Sangam. And always look at the purpose of Sangam literature. It was hardly to glorify the kings in the initial days, which tells us about the secular nature. Yes, glorification of a certain way of life is there, but predominantly it's about describing our harmony, both in terms of society as well as our harmony with nature, which is what many textbooks like Tamil Nadu infer. So if this is the inference given to the students through SCRT textbooks, this underlying logic is tested through some obscure facts. Like say for example, Kurinchi is mountains. If I tell you this, you have to buy hard. You're most likely to buy hard. But what if I tell you that mountains represent a certain kind of a lifestyle, which is what Tamil Nadu textbooks will talk about. Each community, a warrior community, used to stay in certain region. So they are exemplifying a certain emotion. Farmers are talking about unity because we need collective labor. They have a certain kind of a ecosystem. So like this, ecology, lifestyle and literature are unified under one system in Sangam literature. This is the takeaway. Clear? Now, when it comes to ancient Kannada literature, here also you will see same trajectory being taken up. What gives legitimacy to local kings is local language. If you are a pan-Indian kingdom, that classification is always Sanskrit versus something. But if you are a local kingdom, it is the regional language which eventually saw an upward trend to gain legitimacy of the masses. Otherwise, what happened? There was internal fracture because the Samantas or the allies that you can talk about in regional kingdoms, they started creating rupture. So there was one literary work that I was reading which explained the long period of Kaviraja Marg. The first king, Amogha Varsha. Thank you. He ruled for almost 64 years. Why was that period so stable? That period saw a convergence of economic rise, the initial phase of growth of Kannada, and it was a cosmopolitan culture of the South Indian place. Like it is a combination of factors: social, political, economical, everything. The neighboring kingdoms did not have regional stability. So all the learnt men migrated into Rashtrakuta dynasty's regions. So since it was on the banks of certain rivers, like they saw economic prosperity too. So usually the same pattern repeats. It is under that kind of a environment, you will see the growth of a language, literature. Okay, like I told you, literature grows when there is extreme richness or extreme misery. If it is coming from richness, it is economic development, usually patronized by a king. When it is coming from the masses, it is out of frustration or despair. Okay, understand this trend. See how each regional language grew. Why do you think under Sri Krishna Deva Raya, the language of Telugu saw a rise? You would be surprised to know what is the mother tongue of Sri Krishna Deva Raya? Tulu. It's not Telugu. And yet he patronized Telugu. I'm not just implying that it was just to gain political acceptance and legitimacy. In a feudal setup or in a kingdom-based setup, you don't have to appeal to the masses. The weightage to appeal to the masses is very minimal, but it is a combination of the factors of the people around the king. And of course, their personal interest. It is the convergence of all these factors coming into place that leads to the growth of a certain language and the linguistic system. You need to see all this and take a decision. So when you're reading, be curious enough to see these trends instead of directly by-hearting the information. Look at history and culture like a puzzle that needs to be solved. That is the aptitude UPSC is expecting from us. The same information, but underlying logic will change. And yes, I'll tell you one more facet here. The 0 or 1 thinking, the binary thinking that we should all avoid. Let's say 15 questions is what we get from culture. and you get a ridiculously difficult question. Let's say some random Jaina textbook or something like this, you get it, and then understand human mind. We are always primed to sense danger. We look at this question, this difficult question, which is not there in your usual textbooks, and we typecast by saying that history is difficult. We are not getting anything from history without questioning if it is true. Every subject will have the same classification: easy, moderate, difficult. The weightage will usually vary, but difficult questions will not be more than 20%. If the percentage is increasing in history, it will be compensated with some other subjects which is easy. Let's say if you're getting 30% difficult questions in history, you'll get 10% difficult questions in geography. Overall mix will be balanced. So what is the lesson here? You should not ignore any subject. No area should be glorified or vilified. Give due respect for every subject in equal weightage as per the trends. At least in prelims, you will see same weightage more or less given to all the subjects. You cannot pick one year as an outlier and say, see, that year we only got 3 or 4 questions. If your luck is bad, you might get 20 questions, 25 questions from culture only. What will you do? Nothing. You don't ask UPSC any questions. It dictates, you obey. You take the law of averages. Law of averages says every subject is important. Within every subject, you have to pick the low-hanging fruits first. Use this underlying logical structure to gain as many questions as possible in all the subjects. Learn what to leave. Don't go with a premeditated mindset that I have to get 95 questions, 85 questions. It's not going to work always. You have to have that ability to judge the paper. Ultimately, UPSC is about that sense of judgment. If you miss it, you're not going to crack the exam. Nothing should be blind. Everything should be calculated, and it should be premeditated in the sense that you're not going with a fixed logic. You're going with a fixed conceptual understanding of this. What changes? What does not change? What changes? Patterns. What does not change? The underlying concept and logic. This is your savior, not this patterns. Clear? Same logic should be applied to prelims also when you are reading. The same facts when you are by-hearting, you should always ask, why is it like this? That why will save you. Take a look at this. First century, we are looking at some storybooks. Vishnu Sharma wrote Panchatantra. Everybody, even in school level, will by-heart this for their quiz and come to the quiz. What is the difference between that school kid and you? What is the essence? Why are we talking about Niti or wisdom in first century? What is the difference in other texts and this specific fables? Understand the difference. When you are teaching morals from a very philosophical standpoint, it will not appeal to the masses and children. But it doesn't mean that social order is not necessary. That gap is filled by literary works like this. Buddhism recognized this gap and used Jataka tales everywhere to use those metaphors to teach lessons for social order. Literature has the ability to move people, to move societies. And that is the point we usually miss. See the movement of literature from ancient India to medieval. What is the first thing that you notice? Regional languages started growing. Why? Simple. Whatever Buddhism tried to achieve, Buddhism and Jainism, is now achieved through bhakti. You're trying to democratize access to religion. What is religion trying to do? religion is doing only one job. It was supposed to do only one job: reduce your suffering, give a way of life. That original objective was sidelined, and it was used to create fear psychosis. Fear is the glue of masses. Fear kept people together. Why do we move in herds? See, you have this one-liner, punchlines also. Shivaji movie. Why do we unify? Like, ironically, lions don't move alone. They also move in packs. Pride of lions. Maybe they should have corrected this to tiger. Tiger moves alone. Leopards, tigers, they are solitary animals. Anyway, that's a topic for environment. We'll come back. So, fear kept people together. Religion was originally about liberating us, creating a pathway or a systematic procedure to reduce our suffering. That was not delivered to the masses. Bhakti period, Sufi, is yet another time period which tried to deliver this. So, if you want to make this accessible to people, what is the next logical step? Speak in their language, sing in their language, write in their language. And that's the period where regional literature started growing. So if you see the previous year questions, there are certain important literary works which moved the masses. For example, Gita Govindam, Vaishnava Janato, works like this. Different Bhakti saints, the language they spoke, the works they wrote, tried to create a sort of a new social cohesion based on the Bhakti ideals in those respective regions. And this is what the language stands for. Out of all of those, these are important because they are in news. Lal Ded and Habba Kathun in Kashmir region. Both are famous because of Lal Ded, for example, the Tantric Buddhism influence was there and Shaivism influence was there. A religious syncretism was visible in her works. Similarly, you have Habba Khatun, Sufi mysticism was found there. This is the time period where the society was undergoing a transition, especially the Kashmir region, because of its vicinity to the northwestern provinces, from where you have had the invaders entering into our country. This period witnessed the rise of Islam and also the decline of indigenous traditions. Okay, so a literary piece from that specific era reflects the life of how it's like a screenshot of that era. You take a look at that literary piece, read it, you understand the emotion behind it. It gives you a picture of that society in transition. That is what you should be capturing in this. Similarly, you will see many Bhakti poets. So, like this list that you find will now make more sense when you understand why is it the way it is while you're solving previous year questions. This was what I intended to teach you through literature. Now, I'll quickly give you a glimpse of the philosophical traditions, just like an overview before we wind up. What's the purpose of philosophy? What is philosophy? Philosophy says the word philos, Sophie, together means love for knowledge. No wonder all UPSC aspirants are philosophical. So, the original objective of Indian philosophical tradition is not just this. It even involves a purpose. Why do we love knowledge for? To achieve a certain objective. What is that objective? Moksha or liberation. In the modern world, if you see a parallel, we have something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs in psychology. The final point, self-actualization, is loosely translated as moksha. Okay. So, roti, kapda, makan, your craving for luxury life and then social acceptance, respect. That is why you will see human beings start talking about philosophical stuff only when they are rich or when they are in suffering. Same points. You will see that patterns emerging both in psychology and philosophical systems. Just like how human behavior is universal across time and period, the knowledge that various methods of philosophy and the modern sciences, they all talk about only one thing, the universal nature of human beings. We are biologically primed or conditioned to store and accumulate as much as possible, whether it is knowledge, wealth, or even fame. The minute you get rid of this biological need or your emotions, if you can control them, you literally have no interest in anything and you are in an absolute state of bliss, which is what is the promise of liberation. This is the Indian way of life, which naturally has the concept of sustainability embedded in our philosophical systems, because we are saying that anyway you have to leave this place. Why are you trying to accumulate? Let it go. Let it go. That has been the bedrock of Indian civilization. Okay. So when we are moving away from this towards materialism, we are ignoring our philosophical systems lessons, and that is the impact we have on our present day times, whether in terms of climate change or everything. Now coming back, what do you have to understand for our prelims exam? See, first is human suffering is classified into Adi Daivika, Adi Bhautika, Adhyatmika. Should you by heart this? This is a question, I understand. Your instinct is to close this side and start by hearting this. But no, don't do that. Just not yet. Adi Daivika is caused by nature. Adi Bhautika is caused by creatures. Adhyatmika is caused by our mind. I will try to take this into slightly tangential topic of yugas. Okay, there are 4 yugas. Each yuga represents a, this concept of yugas, right? Like a specific time period, and for that time period, a predominant lifestyle is visible. For example, in Kali Yuga, what is the predominant lifestyle? It is apparently selfishness and indulgence, materialism. Okay, that is the signature mark of Kali Yuga. So there was one interpretation where across yugas you move from one end of the spectrum to the other. Let's say, for example, in the first yuga, the battle was between 2 different worlds, hell and heaven, something like that. Then in the next yuga, it was across 2 different continents, which is separated by water. Then in the third yuga, it was the battlefield of, let's say, for example, Mahabharata. They fought on the same piece of land, two sides. Now the battle of Kali Yuga is within your mind. Take that lessons and take a look at this. Adi Daivika, Bhautika, Adhyatmika. Suffering caused by nature. Disaster management, part of your syllabus. Adi Bhautika, suffering caused by creatures. Criminal justice system, part of your syllabus. Adhyatmika, suffering related to mind and spirit. Ethics, part of your system. Ultimate goal, we want ekantika and eternal atyantika liberation, moksha. You want to clear this exam and end this suffering of syllabus and listen to rants like this. So I'm trying to make it easy for you. So this is how the different purposes of philosophy you have to understand to learn how to by heart logically and read the statements in the exam. Because UPSC can ask anything like random texts. The understanding of the concepts will make it easier for you. Okay. So in the subsequent lecture, I wanted to introduce this idea and leave it at this. In the subsequent lecture, what we will be doing is the lesson that we have taken today will be carried forward to the application of the philosophical traditions. And then we will look at some previous year questions from Buddhism and Jainism to help you understand how to navigate this topic and clear the exam. Okay. So when you are memorizing this literary works, which I think is a very, very important theme for 2026 prelims, all the previous year questions, you should read them along with the options. The options text can also become important. Arrange them as per language and timeline. Understand the logic behind their categorization, the backstory, like we discussed, and close that topic, because I'm expecting one question from culture. In that culture, literature part. Okay, this is the backstory. Clear? I'm glad that not a lot of people are zoned out today. Is it because of the lighting? Thank you for not zoning out. Have a good day.